Hello, hello. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, now I think we can hear you, Steve.
Okay, I don't know what's happened there, but something has. Right. Does that sound okay? Because it's going. I've taken the microphone out. This is going purely through the laptop. Is it okay, Adam? Hello.
It's not. I mean, we can hear you more or less. I don't know if everybody gets the same sound.
Let me see if I can get a bit. Is that sounding any better if I get closer?
I think so. Yeah. Maybe we can do something like this.
Yeah, I don't know what's happened. For some reason, the microphone's just. I've literally just did a webinar for somebody else, literally an hour and a half ago, and it was fine. And then had a half an hour break, and then for some reason now it's just decided not to start working. So I'm not sure what's happening, but there we are. But I can do it like this if this is okay, sound-wise.
Yeah, we just don't see your screen. We don't see the presentation now at this moment.
Oh no, I've just turned it off, but I was just trying to get the sound sorted out, so that should be on now. Look. How's that?
Yep, I think we're on.
Okie dokie, let's get rolling. Apologies, I'm not sure what's happening with the technology, but there we are. That's why I prefer live training to technology. It's always what lets me down. So, should we just roll into it, Adam?
Yeah, I did the intro already, so I guess we can go on. Please go on, Steve.
Okay, perfect. Right, I'm going to get straight into it then. Apologies, everybody, for the delay. Technology challenges on my side, nothing to do with the XTB guys. So welcome, emotions, decisions, and trading, the third of our topics in our 3-part series. And just a quick reminder, my name is Steve Ward, work as a trader, performance and psychology coach. Been doing that for nearly 11 years now, working with traders and fund managers all over the globe in a variety of different institutions, banks, funds, energy companies, and proprietary trading groups, and so on. Okay. So today we're talking about emotions. Apologies, having some more technical glitches here. Not our lucky day today. And just before we get into the main bit of the session, I want you to take a little bit of time to think about your own trading and how emotions maybe impact on that. So just for a few moments, just think about maybe in your recent trading, how emotions may have in some way affected your trading decisions or your performance. And maybe think about how it's different, how the emotions and how they affect you are different between when you're trading well and when you're trading maybe not so well. And have a little think about the emotions, the feelings or impulses, the urges, the sensations that you kind of fight with, that you struggle with, the ones that maybe you find uncomfortable, you try and get rid of them. What would be on the list for you? So it's interesting when we look at emotions in trading, and I want to really very quickly give you an idea about how our thinking about emotions in trading has evolved over the last 10 years, certainly since I've been involved in trading, and how that runs parallel to the evolution really of what we know about emotions from neuroscience. So when I first started working in trading, it's 2005, and it was very common for traders to ask me in coaching, Steve, can you help me to trade without emotions? That was a very common question. I'm a good trader, I've got a good strategy, my emotions are getting in the way. And I think because of a result of that, at that time, that was the, it was the, I guess, the control period. Can we control emotions? Can we trade without them? But the role for me as a coach, really, the answer is no. I can't help a trader to trade without emotions, and I'll explain more about what that is in a moment. So then we get traders really looking for, how do they become more effective in their trading? And one of those ways, I guess, what they were trying to do was, can I take emotion out? If I can't remove it from myself, can I find a different solution? And the way they did that was by obviously automating, and that was a process, I guess, of in a way trading without emotion. And so we see a rise in automated programs, in the algos, in the black box, in the grey box. Obviously, some of that advantage can be speed, but for a lot of traders, they were trying to obviously find their way in and doing that. Now, what we see, if we come right up to date into modern times, is the trend in computer programming is something called affective programming, AFFECTIVE, affective programming. And affect is a neuroscience word for feeling. So what we're seeing at the moment is computer programmers trying to put emotion into black boxes because they've realized that logic alone isn't enough. The supercomputer as such for trading will be a blend of emotion and cognition, of thinking and feeling. And that's actually what if we go back to 2005, that's what we had, and that's what we still got. That's the human advantage. And in a nutshell, really, without having too much time, but over the last 10 years, 3 key things have evolved out of neuroscience that we need to really be aware of. One, and this is largely based initially on some work done by a guy called Antonio Damasio, we know now that emotions are key in the human decision process. When information comes in to your brain, it comes in through your senses, and it comes into the limbic system in the midbrain, and an emotion is attached, and then it's sent up to our thinking brain. So information in, feeling attached, then information up to the thinking brain. So we're feeling first, then we're thinking, and that feeling is there to help us in our decision making. We were feeling before we were thinking. Great book by Antonio Damasio, if you want to read it, Descartes' Error. Emotions are a bit like data. So emotions have evolved to be like data for us. And it's one of the key reasons we have emotions is to help us to kind of process what's going on around us, to get information from what's going on around us, and it mobilizes energy. So, let's say if there's some danger around, we might get the sense of the feeling of fear. It lets us know there's some danger. It mobilizes energy for the fight, flight, or freeze response. So emotions are kind of making sense of the world around us, giving us information very quickly, very fast, and they're also mobilizing energy. But emotions really are like a data system. They're giving us information. And if emotions are key to making decisions, and emotions are data, and therefore useful, then what it means for us in terms of traders is we shouldn't be trying to avoid emotion. And actually, if emotions are key to decision making and deeply rooted in the brain, we can't just turn them off anyway. So we've got them. So the paradigm, the new way of thinking is embracing rather than avoiding. And I'll show you why that's really important later on. So what I want to try and do today is enable you to become an emotionally intelligent trader, to be able to work with your emotions in an effective way in line with the latest neuroscience and what we know about the brain and what we've seen working on the trading floor. So there's 4 key things really to becoming emotionally intelligent, particularly as it relates to trading. The first one is the ability to recognize and assess emotions in yourself and in others. And actually in others is important because this is where we can get a bit of market sentiment and feel. The second step is integrating emotion into your thinking and into your decision-making process, so using emotion. Thirdly, understanding emotion in yourself and others. This is a bit like the data. What does the emotion mean? If I'm feeling fear, what is that telling me? If I'm feeling anger, what's that telling me? And then finally, the ability to manage or regulate emotion in yourself or in others. So they're the four kind of key themes. I think, if you can develop those skills and abilities, they're very, very helpful in trading. This is going to be our simple 3 steps that we'll go through today. So 3 kind of sets of skills we'll have a look at. One is developing your emotional awareness. Secondly is working on being more accepting of our emotions. And then thirdly, having an action focus on it. We'll explain these more as we get into them. But this is our basic framework. These are really the 3 skills you need that you can start using from today to be a more emotionally intelligent trader. So this is a framework that I've taken from some guys who have been working with the military, helping them to be more effective decision makers in risky and uncertain environments, very similar to the trading environment. And what they're saying, which is important for us to realize, is that emotions play a key part in situational awareness, the ability to have awareness of yourself, awareness of others, and awareness of the environment. And actually the emotions are giving us information about the environment, and therefore they're supporting rational decision making. Often we get caught in the trap of, was a decision rational or was it emotional? It doesn't really work that way. A decision can be rational and emotional. So let's say you're in a situation, you've got a sense of fear. That fear is a signal telling you, to kind of watch out, look out, could be some danger. There is real danger. You take action to avoid the danger. There you've made a very good decision, but predominantly based on emotion. So emotional and rational. We can have rational and irrational maybe for sure, but we don't want to get into, I think, emotional and rational. They can support each other. Now, we can have 3 ways of working with emotions. Typically, for a lot of people, we see emotions as being a bad thing. That means we try and suppress them, we try and get rid of them. The danger with that is actually we lose awareness, we lose situational awareness. And what happens with suppressing an emotion, it's a bit like being at the beach and having a beach ball and holding it under the water. It's taking energy, it's taking focus away from the screens, but the emotion's still there, it hasn't gone anywhere. And actually at a later date, if you let go of the ball, it comes flying out. And that's where we can get that whoosh of emotion that can lead to revenge trading and trading behaviors which are completely unhelpful. But we also don't want to be on the other side of the screen indulging our emotions. This is where we're kind of really in the emotion, we're playing the emotion out, we're playing with the ball, throwing it in the air. And this is where we're reactive and we're very impulsive. Where we want to try and be is in this middle ground here, having an awareness of our emotions, noticing them as they come, as they go, as they arise. And this would be a bit like having your beach ball, but having it on the water. So the ball is on the surface, and actually with the tide and the wind, the balls come, the balls go. We're aware of it. We're not using energy playing with it or holding it under the water. We've just got awareness, and we can then have more energy and focus to free up on the things that really matter around that. And that's where I want to try and enable you guys to get to, is in this awareness state where we're noticing, but we're not suppressing and we're not reacting. And they're the ones where emotions can really start to become much more of an interference than they perhaps need to be. So let's have a look at some skills for developing emotional awareness. There are 3 key ways that you can do this. We're going to work on one today just because of time and simplicity, which is checking in. Checking in is simply the process of checking in and noticing how you're feeling. So during the course of the trading session, checking in, asking the question, how am I feeling right now? Or what emotion is present right now? And just noticing what emotion it is and naming it. Okay? Now there's a very beneficial effect of not just noticing emotion, but also naming it. So if you're noticing maybe you're feeling a little bit of, let's say some anxiety. So, the feeling of anxiety arises, you notice the feeling of anxiety, and you might say to yourself, okay, here's some anxiety, or I'm experiencing or I'm feeling some anxiety. When you name an emotion, you actually reduce the intensity of the emotion. It's called naming and taming. Naming and taming. When you name the emotion, we tame the emotion. A guy called Matt Lieberman, neuroscientist from UCLA, developed that kind of process. And we can see that happening in real time in brain image machines. So checking in is a great technique. Notice the emotions as you have them, and then name the emotions. And again, if you were doing nothing more than that, you would already make some significant gains in your emotional awareness, but also in your emotional regulation. You can't manage emotions until you've got awareness of them. If you wanted to develop your skills further, then areas such as mindfulness or meditation or awareness training with techniques like breathing and body scan techniques are very powerful, because they get you to notice what's happening in your emotional state in real time. It's happening, you're aware of it while it's happening. So if you want to kind of really supercharge your skills and really develop this ability, then that's an area you can have a look at. And the other one you can have a look at is biofeedback training, where you're hooking yourself up to software, you're training yourself to regulate the emotional state while seeing what's happening on the screen in terms of maybe heart rate and breathing and so on. So you're getting this feedback between what you're doing and what's going on the screen. Let's have a look at checking in a bit more of an advanced version, which would be, we could look at these 4 stages here. So checking in, notice and naming, the simple technique. And again, you could do that during the trading session or do at key points in the trading session. Next, let's take it a little bit broader now. So let's look at the components of emotion, and here we can have a look at the thoughts. So, we're checking in. Well, how are my thoughts right now? What's happening on the feeling system? What do I notice within the body? And what about impulses, urges, any kind of urge to action, any kind of behavioral urges that might be there? And again, we're just getting that a bit deeper here into our emotional awareness, just checking through all 4 stages. And again, we could do that throughout the day, or we might do that at a particular key part of our trading process, maybe before entering a trade, or if we're holding a trade and we start to get the urge to come out of the trade, we could do that there as well. But checking in, very, very powerful technique. If we take our theme of emotions as data, we can start to utilize this as well and combine it with our emotional awareness. So we can start to notice, what am I feeling? But then we can start to combine that with the second question, which is, and what's that telling me? So if emotions are information, then what information is it giving me? What's the message? What's the data? If I'm feeling anxious, what's it telling me? If I'm feeling excited, what's it telling me? If I'm feeling fearful, what's that telling me? Now, emotions as data are very powerful. It works at 2 levels. One, it's useful for us to kind of understand our emotions, but also it's a bit of what we call a reframe. So I remember when I worked in sports psychology, and we'd get young athletes coming through, and they would sometimes be very nervous before an event, and so they'd come in, I'd ask them, oh, look, tell me a bit about how you experience, this pre-race anxiety, and they might say to me, oh, it's heart beats faster, my muscles get tight, I get this funny feeling in my stomach, and what their perception was of this pre-race anxiety was stopping them from performing well. In reality, and once we explained to them, that they were getting ready to perform, so heart's beating faster, getting more blood and oxygen to the working muscles, breathing's increasing, getting more oxygen around the system. You don't need to be digesting food, so blood flow comes away from the stomach towards the working muscles. Once they start to realize, actually, oh, a lot of this is actually helpful for me, it's helping me to perform, then suddenly all the things they thought were unhelpful and were holding them back now become helpful and performance enhancing. And it's the same with our emotions. When you start to see emotions as data and not as negatives, then it's a reframe, it's a shift in how you perceive things, but it's a shift in how you also experience things. So when we get the emotion of fear, what am I feeling? I've got a feeling of fear. What's it telling me? Probably it's saying, watch out, some potential danger. What do I want to do with it? Well, probably we want to check it out. Use the thinking brain. Let's have a check out and see what's going on in case there is some danger. And if there is, we can react to it. If there's not, okay, it was a false alarm, but better safe than sorry. So it's a really great way to begin to be more emotionally intelligent, is think about emotions as data. What am I feeling? What's the message? What's it telling me? And what do I want to do with it? Now, the next stage in our model, after awareness, and again, I'll stress it again, we need the awareness first, but once we've got the awareness, the next stage, which is really important, is all around acceptance. A lot of our trading behavior can be what we call aversive. We're trying to avoid something, and by avoiding something, we take a behavior which unfortunately all too often actually gets in our way. So loss aversion is a very easy one for us to think about. You know, we're averse to losses, so when we're in a situation of losing, to avoid the loss, we stay in the position. It may come back, but quite often we find it goes further and we incur bigger losses. This is the same for ambiguity, it's the same for regret. So these are three sort of the really powerful ones around aversion. So what we have to think about is if aversion is taking our behavior in one way and we want to behave in the other way, it's what's the alternative to aversion. And the alternative to aversion is acceptance. And it's really important because quite a lot of our trading behavior is a playoff between short-term discomfort and long-term gain. So if we think about, again, let's stay with our losing trade example. We're in a losing trade, it's coming down towards our stop loss, starts to get uncomfortable, we don't want to take the loss. What happens is we get some stress response and we get some short-term emotion, primarily with the message of, you know, what can we do to feel good now? And this is uncomfortable. So how do we feel comfortable in this situation? Well, if you're in a situation of losing money and the choice is to take the loss and incur the loss, painful, or to avoid that in the short term brain, the limbic system, very happy for you to stay in that trade. It's focused on instant pleasure now, avoiding pain now. And by staying in a losing trade, we avoid that short-term pain. But there are long-term consequences to that behavior. The alternative is we have to learn to accept and work with the short-term discomfort in order to get the long-term gains. So we've got this kind of playoff between feeling good and feeling right. It's the limbic system, the emotional brain, versus our cortex. And this is going on in lots of examples. You know, when we're running profits, it's the same thing. It gets we get a bit of discomfort. Will it go up further? Will it come back against me? You know, when it gets uncomfortable, we take action to avoid feeling uncomfortable. But lots of those behaviors work against us. This is how it would look for our losses situation. You know, this is a pain avoidance scenario. Short-term avoidance of pain, we stay in the trade, but the potential for bigger losses is increased. Or we have to take the short-term acceptance of pain of loss, exit the trade, and then we minimize our losses in the long run. Now, how do we stay in these uncomfortable positions? Well, there's a couple of things that happen, or in these uncomfortable situations. A couple of things happen. One is we need to, before we even are in our trade, we need to be open and accepting to the fact that we are going to experience discomfort, both on the downside for our losses and running our trades to the upside for our profits. And that discomfort is something I think when you're newer to trading, you keep hoping it's going to go away. But I've got guys I coach who've been trading 15, 20, 25 years plus, and they still encounter these discomforts. They've got better at managing them. They may be slightly less impactful, but they're still there. So it's not an absence of these discomforts. They've just got good at managing them and working with them. Once we start to see emotions as data, once you increase your emotional awareness, you will shift the intensity of the emotion, so it will be easier to stay with the difficult situations, because they won't be as difficult anymore. We make them more difficult by making the emotions the enemy. But once we learn to become much more of an observer of our emotions, we can remove ourselves from that high intensity and get a little bit of distance. And this is where we get the choice and flexibility to be essentially more disciplined. But it means a couple of things. One, it means we've got to start to notice the temptation to suppress, to drive away unwanted thoughts and feelings. This is a common human tendency, is suppression, pushing things away, avoidance. It's our way of dealing with discomfort. But what we need to do in trading, particularly if you want to be a successful trader, is we have to embrace this discomfort. So we've got to kind of be willing to accept, some of these uncomfortable emotions, these uncomfortable thoughts, these uncomfortable urges and impulses, and work with them. And we can do that by having more awareness of them. We can do that by seeing them as data. So we're doing a reframe, a shift in our perception. We can also do that through experience. The more that we practice working with difficult emotions, the easier it becomes over time. It's the exposure effect. But it's also this mindset, about kind of accepting the difficulty and working with the difficulty. Is important. And the more of an observer you can become, the easier in a way it is. It's a bit like, imagine a river. The river's running really wild. If you're in the river and it's wild, you're being washed around and thrown about all over the place. And you just go where the river goes. But if we can bring ourselves above the river, noticing the river running wild, then the river's still running wild, but our experience of it is different. So you can start to do this with your emotions. And one simple way of doing this in terms of language is, rather than, I'm angry or I'm afraid or I'm frustrated, it's called a diffusion technique, where we kind of just get a little bit of distance away, reduce the intensity by, for example, I'm noticing a feeling of fear. I'm noticing a feeling of anxiety. I'm noticing I have a feeling of stress. So we're noticing that we've got a feeling of whatever that feeling might be. And what that technique does is it just separates away this short-term kind of intense, I'm angry. I'm noticing I'm experiencing a feeling of anger. It's a very different process. It's a great one to train yourself with. It's to start to, when you recognize emotions, notice them as emotions. It's an experience, it's an emotion you're having at this moment in time. Emotions are transient, they move, they come and go. So it's a great little technique to have in your toolkit. But even with awareness and even with acceptance, we're still going to have these emotions around us. We're not getting rid of them. They're there, they're less intense, but they're still there. And when we look at people's need to trade without emotion, what I find actually is lots of the best traders still have emotion. We all have emotion. We can't get rid of it. It's part of our system, as we've talked about. And this is a great example here, really. This is Captain Sullenberger, the American pilot who landed the plane on the Hudson. I think it's about 2009. But the misconception was really this kind of icy, cool, calm person, no emotion, no stress. But when he was interviewed, quite the opposite. Strong physiological reaction. Had to force himself to use his training, force calm on the situation. But within that, that's part of it. There's kind of, there was a strong reaction. So it's not stress-free. But in there's this second part where he talks about the things that he needs to do to land the plane. And this is important for us as traders, is recognizing that we can have emotions, but we can still focus and we can still do the things we need. We can have a feeling of fear, but we can still enter the market if we feel that's what our process, should be getting us to do. We can have an emotion. We don't have to act out the emotion. The emotion may bring some influence to our behavior. It doesn't mean that it directly affects our behavior and drives it. I can feel tired in the morning. I can stay in bed. I can feel tired in the morning. I can get out of bed. There is some choice and flexibility in there. It will depend to a large degree how committed I am to my trading process. And it will depend a bit on skills. It will depend a bit on experience and training. But these things all come together. But the key thing I want you to recognize is that poise is this ability to be able to perform even when there might be some difficult emotions or some difficult, levels of stress or difficult thoughts around us. If we wait for there to be almost nothing, we might have a very long wait. Bearing in mind the nature of the trading game is risk and uncertainty. So This is why having a trading process is really important, and why we stress this in the first session around developing your process, is because when emotional stress or our thinking is kind of getting a bit in our way or interfering a little bit, what we need to anchor ourselves down to is the process. What's important right now? And you can see how Sullenberg has done that same process. What's important right now? Do the best you can, name the emotions, notice the emotions, get the feedback from the data. This is all reducing the intensity. Sometimes we need to just press the pause button for a moment, take a few slow breaths, in for 3, out for 6, nice and slow, or in for 4, out for 4. But a nice slow rhythmic breathing pattern can be enough to calm the nervous system down. But essentially, we still need to then think about what is important right now. Focus on action. Now, probably one of the emotions that gets talked about the most in trading is fear. So this is the results of an SFO magazine poll from 2008, where they asked which emotion's toughest for you to control, hope, greed, or fear. And we can see that fear is the winner by quite some way. Interestingly, I would say greed actually is just another form of fear. Greed is fear of missing out. I would say hope is also fear. It's fear of loss. So actually they're all fear. So fear is definitely the winner. And probably the biggest fear of all is fear of fear. I think a lot of traders are afraid of feeling afraid, but we don't need to be afraid of feeling afraid if we understand and we are emotionally intelligent. So what is fear? Well, there's 3 things to think about with fear. We need to understand really what fear is. It's our brain's response to perceived danger. Okay? So, and remember, emotion's faster than thinking. So if your brain detects some potential danger, it will alert you very quickly, and it will do that through the feeling of fear. It's like a watch out, it's a warning light. Would we want to be without fear? Well, if we did and we couldn't detect danger, we have to question how long we would actually live for outside of markets and how long we'd live for in markets. Probably not too long. So biologically, fear is there as a survival mechanism. It's there to help us both outside of trading and inside of trading. What we need to do is remember that and work with it. We do want to be aware of the signs and symptoms of fear. So we want the awareness, noticing maybe there's some fear coming in, but then recognizing it's now data. What's it telling me? Okay, so we recognize the fear. Oh, I'm noticing I'm having a feeling of fear. Okay, what's it telling me? It's saying basically fear is always saying watch out, potential danger. Okay, let's have a check round. Have I missed something out in my research or my analysis? Has something changed in the market that I've not noticed consciously, but my brain has unconsciously? Okay? And and again, not trying to resist it or get rid of it, but working with it and accepting it. And again, that's just very quickly, hopefully, just giving you an idea about how we can shift the way that we work with our emotions if we start to think about what we know about the brain and how the brain works. We can try and suppress emotion, we can indulge emotion, we can try and control it all we like. We're just going to get tired. Nothing's going to change. And I can say that because probably in the early days of my psychology career, that's what we were teaching people in sport and in trading. And it's an ongoing hard work process. The work over the last 5 or 6 years, much more down this road, has probably been much more successful for people. It's a lot less energy. People feel a bit more free. And counterintuitively, without trying to control the emotions as much, you actually get less interference from them. But, we are working with them, embracing the emotion. In a way, we want to harness emotion, make it more of an edge, bring in that data from around us, give us an extra edge. Now, we've talked about, I guess, a psychological model for working with emotions in terms of awareness and acceptance and action focus. But we must remember that there are other things we can do as well. So it's not just about those 3 key things to do. So, your level of competence, how your skills, your knowledge, your understanding, they're going to have an impact on, your levels of emotion. Your levels of experience, likewise, are going to affect your levels of emotion. Your strategy and the type of strategy it is, and the time frames, and how much you believe in it and trust in it, and its kind of risk-reward ratios and the returns you get from it, are all going to impact the emotions you experience in your trading, as is risk management. And actually, if you're a trader whose risk management may be taking too much risk, and your strategy is not very well defined, and you've got low experience, and you've got low knowledge and skill, then trading is going to be pretty emotional. But if you're somebody with, as you build competence and experience and develop your strategy, and you learn to manage your risk well, then you'll find that trading will be very different emotionally. So there are some very practical things that you can be doing. Likewise, preparation. Going into the markets, being fully prepared, knowing what you need to know for the trading session. Exercise has been shown to be an excellent way of, in a way, training yourself to improve emotional regulation. So people who exercise regularly generally have improved and enhanced processes and successes with emotional regulation. So regular exercise can be very useful. Likewise, mindfulness, we've talked about this a couple of times before in the program, very, very, very beneficial in terms of helping you to develop that awareness in the present moment, noticing what's happening while it's happening. Very powerful. And then, again, where do we place our attention and focus? We know that in lots of performance situations where people focus too much on the process, focus too much on the outcome, they get performance anxiety. And the alternative to that is to focus on the process, focus on what's controllable. So it's a combination really of understanding a bit about the brain and the neuroscience. There's a combination around developing awareness particularly around, I think the first steps are just by checking in, just by noticing and naming those emotions. Your next step is really then to look at acceptance, to move from loss aversion to loss acceptance, to move from regret aversion to regret acceptance, to move from ambiguity aversion to ambiguity acceptance, and to make these shifts. And the key thing there is we have to move away from the old model, the conventional wisdom that emotion is bad and we should try and be without it, towards what we know now, which is emotion is there to help our decision-making process. Yes, for sure, at the extremes, emotion can get in the way of our decision-making process. But that's where we need to be able to regulate it. In the middle area, a lot of the time, we want to kind of harness that and work with it. We need to keep our focus on action, and this is where having your process and things like checklists become very, very helpful and important. And for Sullenberger, for sure, the checklist process based with experience and training, and then those checklist reminders, what's important right now, would have been really important. And then we can also utilize, I guess, around the edge of that, at a more behavioral level, emotional management strategies around, competence and resiliency and risk management and preparation and mindfulness and so on. And it's really when you put all those things together that actually you start to really shift the experience of your trading in terms of the emotions you experience or not. Now, I think for newer traders, the one bit of advice I would give is definitely think about your risk. Keep risk comfortable. As soon as people start increasing risk to points where it's uncomfortable, this is where the emotions come in, the nervous system gets aggravated, stress response kicks in, and it's very, very difficult. So it's always better to trade slightly smaller than try slightly larger. But I say there are a number of things you can do there. I would strongly encourage you, if you really want to look at, getting more of a handle on your emotions, working with them more effectively, the mindfulness area or meditation or attention or awareness training, whatever you want to call it. But I think there's lots to offer in that area there for people, so we can start to experience and work with emotions in real time. Okay, I'm going to finish off on emotions there. It's a big, big topic. There's some more in the books that you can read through, and obviously have a look at the webinar again. But obviously I'm very happy to take any questions that you've got around emotions specifically, but also around trading psychology in general. As I said before, so it's very difficult because I won't know you or know your trading background or history, but obviously we'll do the best we can to give an answer that's hopefully useful and maybe general enough for the whole audience out there as well.
All right, thank you very much, Steve. Message for everybody now. This is the time for asking your questions. So if you have any, please use the chat window. But let's start with this one, Steve. How long does it take for a trader who starts working on emotions, basically starts working with emotions? How long does it take to start embracing them and begins a successful trading career? Because at some point, a person that doesn't succeed in managing emotions has to quit trading, basically. Is there a time frame after which one can say, okay, trading is not for me?
Okay, great questions, Adam. There's a couple of things in there. I think the time frame for is trading for me, there's not a set one because everyone's going to be slightly different, but certainly if I look at what we, in the proprietary trading groups, and maybe this is true for retail guys, closer to being true for retail guys, but I would say if you're trading in a very committed way, putting lots of time and effort in, then it's going to take at least up to 3 to 4 years before you really know and have really got the skills to be successful. So probably the 3 to 4 year mark, if you've been committed, is a point at which, if you look at your results and whether you're enjoying trading or not, is probably a relatively significant time frame, maybe even 3 to 5 years. But if you're trading only a small number of hours per week, then that obviously might take a lot longer before you would really know. So I think it all depends on how much effort and time you're putting in for how long it takes to realize if you're going to make it or not. But when it comes to emotions specifically, it all depends on the person and their personality to a degree, so that's going to be a factor. It depends on which techniques they use and how much effort they put into using those techniques and how much time they spend practicing. But as an example, I was working with a client a few years ago, and he was an interesting character because he was an international sports person, played basketball, and also was a downhill skier for his country, very high level. And then became a trader. And when we started working in his trading, one thing he talked about was how his emotions really were clouding his decision making and getting in the way. That was one thing he wanted to work on. It was also interesting because he said to me it was the same problem we'd had in his basketball and in his skiing, and that had stopped him really from getting up to the very highest levels. So we did some work together. Now we did a bit around understanding emotions, like we've talked about today, which he found very helpful, recognizing they're not the bad guys, that they've got a purpose, that essentially lots of the time they're there to help us. We then did some work around awareness, so beginning to notice emotions and beginning to notice them as they're arising. So, if we've got emotions like maybe fear or anxiety or frustration, it's beginning to notice those emotions earlier and earlier and earlier, so we get to the very first signs, not waiting until it's kind of overwhelmed us. And then we did a bit of work, not nothing too much, but I just encouraged him to get between about 5 and 10 minutes a day of mindfulness practicing. Now, after about 2.5, 3 weeks, when we met for probably our third session, it must have been, he said to me he could already notice that he was being less kind of intense in his emotions in his trading. And by the end of 6 weeks, it was very different for him. So I think with hard work and effort, definitely over a 6 to 8 week period, people can make some quite significant progress with managing emotions. But again, it all comes down to, how much time they put in and how much practice and so on.
So it's an evolution rather than revolution.
Yeah, I think in my work, Adam, 90% of the time it is going to be evolutionary. And I think it's not something that you get to a point where suddenly you realize you're the emotional master. It's an ongoing, we're practicing ongoing, because the nature of trading with the uncertainty and the risk and the demands, we can always be thrown off guard a little bit. So, these are things we work on consistently. We get better at working on them, and we just maybe get less interference over time. But we won't end up like a robot, and we don't want to be either.
All right, thank you. Here we have a question from one of our audience members. Do you think that there are any situations in which your decision has to be taken based on what emotions say? Did you encounter situations like this?
That's a great question. Now, there's a book called Risk Savvy by a guy called Gert. I think his surname's Gergenheinzer. Now, in that book, he talks about a lot of research which suggests that as uncertainty increases, that feeling will outperform thinking, because as we get increasing uncertainty, by nature we can't really work out the probabilities of what's happening because they're significantly unknown. And in those situations, our gut feel and our emotions are probably, inexperienced performers particularly, going to be more useful. So that's pretty interesting. Now, where have we experienced that? I think the closest example we've got to a good case for that was during the financial crisis, during the crash, when a lot of banks, in sort of the midst of chaos, a lot of money was being lost by the black box machines, so they turned those off, turned off the logic machines, and then handed over the reins to the human, the people who can kind of think and feel, where we can probably cope with that uncertainty much better. And again, the suggestion is maybe what enables us to do that might be this, emotional and feeling system. And again, it is very well evolved, and one of the prime functions of the stress response and of emotion at a basic level is risk reward. It's fear for risk and it's excitement for reward. So we can get very fast, very quick information from our emotions. And that's probably actually the other time when emotion may outperform logic, or probably does, is for very short time frame price action traders, where you're learning through pattern recognition, it's implicitly learnt, and actually you're trading much more off feel most of the time than you are off logic. And actually with some very short time frame traders, it's very hard for them to explain what they do and why they do it, because they never really learned it anywhere. It's all been developed through feel. So yeah, I would say there definitely are times when the bias is going to be more towards emotion than sort of thinking and logic.
All right, thank you. And this one is a little bit longer one, but let me rephrase it. You spoke about fear, and this is the most negative emotions, the emotion that we have to deal with. But isn't it fear actually helpful? All these risk management strategies that we develop, all great traders in the world, they always mention about cutting your losses quickly, controlling your losses, and so on. This is basically fear of losing a lot of money, so it's good. Shouldn't we be developing fear in our, let's say, in our trading psychology? Because of that, we are afraid of losing a lot, and thanks to that, we can survive longer periods of losing trades by being afraid of losing.
Yeah, well, that's the point. Obviously, it didn't come across very well, but that's exactly the key point I've tried to make in the webinar, is the fact that our emotions are there to help us. Emotions are key to our decision making, that they are data, and that we don't want to be without them. So whether it's fear or whether it's excitement or whatever the emotion is, we don't want to be without them, because every emotion we're having is telling us something. And that's why when we looked at the slide around fear, I talked about, I think I labelled it understanding fear, because the point of that slide is exactly what that guy was saying there, that embracing fear. We're not trying to be without it. It's about awareness, recognising the signs of the fear coming in, about understanding the data behind fear, which is saying, watch out, be careful. That's why we get the feeling of fear. And accepting, it is biological. We can't be without it, and absolutely healthy. I mean, this is one of the key things around emotions, is at a very basic level, we just go back to, there are 8 primary sort of key emotions, and sort of 2 of those are fear and excitement. They're sort of the 2 ends of the continuum. And fear is our risk emotion, and excitement is our reward emotion. And they definitely can help and guide us in our decision making. So yeah, I absolutely agree with what that person was saying. And that's what I was really trying to get through, but obviously maybe it didn't come through as clearly as I hoped.
Okay, and I guess the last question. So if emotions help us people in our trading, is there a day in the future that computers or automated systems can surpass human traders?
Well, they can surpass us already based on speed, so it all depends on obviously the type and style of trading. So if you look at HFT, high frequency trading, that surpasses human emotion based on obviously just superior speed. They can surpass us in terms of complexity sometimes, but again, going back to where we've got the uncertainty, and the greater the uncertainty, that's where, you know, I think humans can, and adaptability actually, and flexibility. This is where we still have significant edge as humans. I think that the warning time will be this evolution now of affective programming, where they're actually trying to program emotion into computers. When they can have computers that can think and can feel, and I think they're quite a long way away from that yet, because emotion's pretty complex. But when they can have those two, then I think, you know, that's a pretty powerful computer, and we probably should be wary. But I think until then, you know, I think the only organism, or the only thing on the planet that's got both well-established thinking and feeling is us. So for a short time, we still have the edge.
All right, Steve, I think that's it. I think we don't have any more questions for you tonight. So I want to thank you very much. We appreciate you being with us, those series of webinars. I hope that everybody learn a lot and can apply this to their trading and improve their trading. So thank you very much, Steve, again, and thank you everybody for attending today's and the previous webinars.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you very much.